ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله ومن كانت هجرته لدنيا يصيبها أو امرأة ينكحها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه. Indeed, deeds are by their intentions. And we heard this hadith many times before. And he started the book with this hadith, the importance of the intentions in matters of ibadah in every matter. And we'll go through the benefits that Shaykh Abdul Rahman rahimahullah mentioned after the hadith. إنما الأعمال بالنيات, deeds are indeed by their intentions, and indeed for every person what he intended. So whoever his hijrah was to Allah and his messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, then his hijrah is to Allah and his messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And whoever his hijrah from Mecca to Al-Madinah or any hijrah, لدنيا يصيبها, for a dunya to attain it, to attain any matter of worldly life or livelihood matters, أو امرأة ينكحها, or a woman to marry, then فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه, then his hijrah is to whatever he migrated to, according to one's intentions. People making hijrah, some they make it for the sake of Allah and his messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, then they make it for the sake of Allah, going to the messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, following the way of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, they would get what they intended. Those who migrated to make money, for someone to get married, then they will get whatever they intended. Shaykh Abdul Rahman rahimahullah, he says first, the book is in such a way that he talks about some of the meanings of some of the words, then the general explanation of the hadith, then what we learn from the hadith. This is every hadith, he does this. So I'm trying to get the attention of everyone that this is such a good book to start with in even studying these types of the hadith, and it sets one's understanding in mashallah in a very nice way. First of all, he says, and there's some linguistics a little bit here, so إنما الأعمال بالنيات. The word إنما in the Arabic language تفيد الحصر. It gives the meaning of al-hasr. Hasr, when something is exclusive. So that means whatever comes after it, this is the only ones that to be described with what comes after. So when it says إنما الأعمال بالنيات, that means the deeds are by their intentions and nothing else. So there's no deeds unless it's going to be judged by its intentions. There's no exception. There's no deed without an intention. So this is the significance of إنما. Like إنما المؤمنون إخوة. When you have in the Quran, إنما المؤمنون إخوة, that means indeed the believers are nothing but brothers and nothing else. So if they are believers, they are brothers. So you can get from that so many different benefits. That means if they're not brothers, that means there is weaknesses in their iman. And if there is weakness in the iman, that means there will be weaknesses in the brotherhood. Because of إنما المؤمنون إخوة. So here إنما الأعمال بالنيات. So the hukm, the ruling of the actions is according to the intentions and nothing else. The second thing is النية. What does النية means? إنما الأعمال بالنيات. النيات is the plural of النية. And النية is basically what a person's objective or his goal about something that he's doing. This is the intentions, are one's intention to do something. There is the definition also he mentioned here that البيضاوي, he said النية عبارة عن انبعاث القلب نحو ما يراه موافقا لغرض من جلب نفع أو دفع ضر. انبعاث القلب, the heart is البعث is when something start moving after it's been not moving. So this action done by the heart towards what the heart sees that he seeks, whether it's from a benefit that he wants or harm to push away. So it's not something physical. An-niyya is only in the heart when the heart wants to do something for whatever reason, whether it's something good to do or something to push away harm. This is linguistically. But religiously, شرعا العزم على فعل العبادة تقربا إلى الله تعالى. To have the determination to do the act of ibadah, seeking the closeness to Allah, seeking the pleasure of Allah, seeking the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. This is what an-niyya religiously means. To have that strong determination to establish the ibadah, seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So the ibadah is done to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's done seeking the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in hereafter. And then the examples, as he says, explains what is mentioned in the beginning. فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ, whoever his hijrah, and so on. This is a conditional statement. And the first one, the jawab al-shart, or the answer of the conditional statement, say if such and such, then so when it's mentioned Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the conditional statement says then his hijrah is to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, meaning in the thawab and the ajr and the rewards. But then when it was for dunya matters, when it was for a wife to marry, then it says فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى مَا هَجَرَ, because it's no significance. Then his hijrah is to whatever he migrated for. Did not repeat the same thing over again, because it is of no value whatsoever. So what's value is if the hijrah was to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The general meaning of the hadith, that this is a great hadith and a very important foundation and a principle in the deen of Islam. And this is basically the proper understanding of when it comes to the actions, whether it's going to be accepted or not, and whether it's going to be, when it comes to matters of rewards. So two things: whether the deed is accepted or not, and whether the deed will have more rewards or not, or the levels of rewards. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he said that the actions are according to the intentions, so if the intention is a valid one, seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that means the action is accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If it's not, then it's rejected. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most rich. He does not have partners subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if someone seek with his actions other than Allah, He would leave him and whatever he sought as a partner with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the Prophet ﷺ gave the example of the hijrah, with the hijrah. So this is, we get to know that the niyyah, when it comes to whether the action is accepted or not, and also the level of the thawab depends also upon the niyyah. The person, how much he gets reward according to the intentions. Another thing, since also the subject will be fiqh, النية تميز أو النية تمييز العبادة عن العادة. It separates, differentiates between the ibadah, the acts of worship, from the habits. For example, if someone takes a shower, because this is what he used to do daily, two people, they took, one took a shower and the other one took a shower. One is doing it as a ibadah, and one is doing it just because this is his habits. What would differentiate or separate between both is the actions is the same, it's only the intentions. So like ghusl al-janaba, when someone is making the ghusl when he's in state of janaba, that he has to make ghusl, it's obligatory for him to take ghusl, and then he will be able to make salah afterwards. What made it a ghusl is the intentions in his heart, that he's doing that to purify himself from the janaba, or even if there's no janaba. If someone is not in state of janaba, he did not have relations or so, he just wanted to take a shower instead of making wudu. Can a person do that? Yes. But with his intentions that he's making ghusl, washing all of his body, including the mouth and the nose, so that he is in state of tahara, so that he can make salah. And he doesn't have to make wudu in the ghusl. If he just jumps into the water with the intention of being in state of tahara, purification, and make the madmada and istinshaq, and he comes out, he can make salah. Right? Even if he does not have to make the janaba. So what made the difference here is the niyyah. Separates between ibadah and the habits or what people do. So therefore, he says, وَلِلنِّيَّةِ فِي الشَّرْعِ حَالَتَانِ. So when it comes to the shara', the niyyah, then as we heard now before, two things. The first is sincerity of the actions only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is also always mentioned, as he says, in the subject of the ulama of the tawheed, was-siyar, was-suluk, in the subject of the tawheed, in the subject of purifying one's heart in manners. You always talk about the intentions and the importance of intentions. The second thing is what separates or differentiates between the ibadat from one another. And this is where the fuqaha, they speak about this. For example, full rak'ah. It can be dhuhr, it can be asr, it can be isha. right? What makes it Dhuhr or Asr or Isha is the intentions. The intentions of the person, right? And the intention is in the heart. You don't say anything. You don't say Nawaitu, or I have the intention to pray Salatul Dhuhr. Or we don't have to, a person would say, well, why would someone pray Salatul Dhuhr at Isha time if he missed it? But if someone is at time of Dhuhr praying 4 rak'ah, or at time of Fajr is praying 2 rak'ah, is it Sunnah Salah or it's Fard Salah? What makes the difference is the niyyah, is the intention. So this is also shows the intentions in matters of ibadat and how it's different from one another. And this hadith is again one of the comprehensive hadith that needs to be well taken care of. He says, فَالْكِتَابَةُ الْقَلِيلَ لَا تُؤْتِي حَقَّهُ. The writings of what he wrote here does not fulfill the rights of this hadith. Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah, he started his book with this hadith, and because it's included in every mas'ala, in every matter of ilm, you need this hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, in every subject, as we heard. In anything, we need to start always with إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. The benefits to be taken from the hadith, he mentioned 6 things. First of all, as also mentioned before, so the actions are according to their intentions, صحة وفسادا, whether it's valid or not valid, كمالا ونقصا, whether it's perfect or deficient, وطاعة ومعصية, obedience to Allah and sinful. Right? All of that goes with the intentions, whether it's the action is valid or not, whether it's perfect or not, whether it's an act of obedience to Allah or a sinful act. So whoever, for example, intended with his action to show off, al-riya, he will be, this is a sin, this is a sinful act. So if someone, for example, making salah, he's making the salah physically in front of the people just to show off, he's sinful. It's not just that the salah is not going to be accepted, he is sinful, he is committing a sin. What should that person do? Should he quit the salah? No. But he should make the salah that the intentions of it is sincerely for the sake of Allah. That's different than if someone is making salah and then the riya comes in. He's making the salah for the sake of Allah, but while he is in salah, the shaitan whispers to him or whatever, his own nafs, he starts to show off in his salah. This is different. If he continues with it, if he continues with the riya and he likes it and he enjoys that he's showing off his salah, he's sinful. He's committing a sin and he takes the reward, and the salah can even be invalid in this case. But if he hates it so much when he gets that feeling and he tries to push it away from himself, it's not something that is pleasant for him, then he is there's no sin here involved, and as long as he pushes it away, it doesn't decrease anything from the salah. And if he's forgetful, it just the feeling of riya came in that he's showing off and he's forgetful, he loses from the rewards of the salah as much as the time that he was showing off. But so this is again is an example. And we mentioned here the example of someone intended with al-jihad, for example, to make the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala superior, his thawab will be complete. And whoever intended this also for the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be superior and to get some benefits like the ghanima, the booty of the war and so on, his rewards will be decreased. But whoever intended only the materialistic benefits of the booty of the war and so on, he says, lam ya'tham, he's not going to commit a sin in this case, but he does not get the rewards of someone that is mujahid, that fought for the sake of Allah. This is in that particular case. So the hadith is mentioned to show clearly that every action, whether it's an act of obedience in its way it's done, or a sin, it's different according to the intentions of the people. But of course, if a person commits a sin, there's no way that the intention is to be for a good cause. It doesn't matter, it's a sin. It does not change the sin to be a good deed with a good intentions. So if someone do anything haram, like for example attend a sinful gathering so that he can get the hearts softened between himself and his relatives, for example, so that they don't get angry with him. It's a good intention that he wants to have good relationship with his relatives, but he would do that with a sinful mean. Then it's haram for him. It's not going to change the fact that he committed a sin. It does not change the sinful act to be a good deed. The second benefit is that the niyyah, the intention, is a basic condition for actions. But without ghulu, without extremism, in trying to bring the niyyah constantly that makes the person might ruin his ibadah. That he is focusing so much to make sure that his intentions, that he's praying now Salatul Dhuhr, 4 rak'ah, and it's Dhuhr, like this. The intentions is not something that you need to exert yourself to be upon. It's something that should come with ease. So just for the fact that a person is making the salah, without takalluf, without making things out of the norm, to bring it, this is what is intended here. النية محلها القلب واللفظ بها بدعة. The niyyah, the place of it is the heart. That's why if a person says something, this is bid'ah. It's his innovation in the deen. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ never said anything with regards to the niyyah. He never said نويت أن أصلي صلاة العشاء or نويت أن أتوضأ, or I have the intention to do that. This is only in the heart. And if a person says something and his heart upon something else, the tongue does not benefit him. And that's what happened when those who would say nawaitu, sometimes they would come, for example, Salatul Asr, and he's rushing to the Salah, he's not paying attention. He might say nawaitu an usalli Salatul Dhuhr, right? And it's Salatul Asr. Then he get confused. Is he praying Dhuhr or Asr? His heart is Asr, but his tongue, he made a mistake and he said Dhuhr. And this is all bid'ah anyway. So it's what matters is what's in his heart. Also, number 4 is the obligation to warn oneself against al-riya, showing off. Al-riya was sum'ah. Al-riya comes with seeing, from al-ru'ya, that a person would do something for people to see him. Al-sum'ah is a person would do something so that people hear about him and he becomes famous. And doing things for dunya matters, for worldly matter, for worldly benefit. So to warn oneself against this. Number 5, وجوب الاعتناء بأعمال القلوب ومراقبتها. The obligation of taking care of the deeds done by the heart, and to watch oneself when it comes to the deeds done by the heart. And many people, they won't pay attention to this. Even when we teach our children how to make salah, or someone is a new Muslim teaching him how to make salah, stand, recite, make ruku', like this. And it's important, of course, but the importance of making sure that the heart is upon something, this is as important as physically doing the acts of worship. So the importance of the niyyah and all the different acts of done by the heart, the devotion, the khushu', the sincerity, the love of Allah, even when a person is making salah, the fear. You're making salah because if you don't make salah, you subject yourself to the punishment of Allah. It's an act of ubudiyyah to Allah. This is an act of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at the same time, you hope for the rewards from Allah when you're making the salah. And you have the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you're doing it sincerely for the sake of Allah. So to make sure that the deeds done by the heart is well taken care of. And the 6th benefit, since the subject of al-hijrah was there, is that al-hijrah, or migration, is min bilad al-shirk ila bilad al-islam, from the places of shirk to the bilad of al-islam, from the best acts of worship if a person intends by this the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because not just the physical movement, but it's in how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised the muhajirin and made them in general in a higher level than the ansar, because they left everything for the sake of Allah. So and what's important here is to leave things for the sake of Allah, for the person to be obedient to Allah and to do everything for the sake of Allah, even seeking knowledge. As the hadith or as the statement of one of the early generations of Islam, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, when he said, "Man talaba al-ilm li'izzat al-Islam, kana min as-siddiqeen." Whoever seeks knowledge, for what reason? For the honor of the deen of Islam, for the power of the deen of Islam, to give victory to the deen of Allah. He's among the siddiqeen. He's among the truthful ones. So it's always the intentions. There's a fa'idah or a benefit here that he quotes from Ibn Rajab rahimahullah, that أن العمل لغير الله على أقسام. The deeds done for other than Allah is of different categories. Sometimes it's riya and mahdan. Sometimes it's pure riya, just to show off, pure showing off. He does not intend with his actions anything except for people to see it so that he can get a worldly benefit. He says, هذا لا يكاد يصدر من مؤمن. This is almost never comes from a believer. There's very rarely to think a believer would do something like this. We're talking about the acts of ibadah. A person would do a salah or so, he has his intentions are purely to show off from the beginning to the end, or to seek worldly benefit. And that's it. He says, no doubt, لا شك في أنه يحبط العمل. No doubt that it ruins the deed, of course, it's not accepted. And وأن صاحبه يستحق المقت من الله والعقوبة. And the one that does this, he deserves the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the first category. When it's purely for to show off. Act of ibadah is done purely to show off. The second one, وتارة يكون العمل لله ويشاركه الرياء. The second category is that the amal, the action, is for the sake of Allah. His intentions is for the sake of Allah, but الرياء is with it. ويشاركه. That means there is riya in the action. Here, in this second type, فإن شاركه من أصله, a branch from here, if the riya, if the show off is part of the action from its roots, from the beginning of it, that means a person is making the salah for both intentions. His salah is to seek in the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and he's making the salah also to show off, both in the same level like this. He says, فَإِنَّ النُّصُوصَ الصَّحِيحَةِ, the authentic narrations, there is an evidence from the authentic narrations, تَدُلُّ عَلَى بُطْلَانِهِ, that proves that this action is not valid, it's not accepted, if both are from the roots of the actions. A person equally having these two intentions together, for the sake of Allah and for the show off also. وإن كان أصل العمل لله, the second part of that from the second meaning of the riya and the ikhlas, or the show off and the sincerity is together, if the foundation and the original intention of the person that the action is only for the sake of Allah, this is how he starts the action, then ثم طرأ عليه نية الرياء, then the show off came about. It wasn't from the beginning. It was, he started the ibadah for the sake of Allah, but then something happened. Someone walked into the room, so he started to show off. Something like this. وَدَفَعُ صَاحِبُ, if a person, that feeling comes, if he pushes it away, it doesn't harm him, and there's no khilaf, there's no differences of opinions in this. So, which also proves that not everything that a person, a whim or a thing that a thought that he comes, he's responsible for it. Even if it's one's nafs and oneself. So if someone, again, a person making salah, someone walks into the room, and he was alone, he was doing the salah for the sake of Allah. Someone walks into the room, so he start making the salah longer, for example. If he get that feeling, let me make the salah longer because someone came, so he can see that, mashallah, that I'm making a good salah. If he push that thought away, there's no harm for him, there's nothing wrong, because this is a normal thing. It's a normal thing that a person would have these types of thoughts. And it's not his actions. Shaitan is whispering things like this. If he pushes it away. But then, if he takes that thought and he start doing the act of showing off, he does not push it away. He says, وَقَدْ اخْتَلَفَ الْعُلَمَاءُ مِنَ السَّلَفِ فِي الْإِسْتِرْسَالِ فِي الرِّيَاءِ الطَّارِئِ. The ulama of the early generations of Islam, they have differences of opinions when it comes to keep going with the riya, with the show off that just came not from the beginning but came while the person is doing the ibadah. What is the differences of opinions here? Whether the amal, the action, will be ruined and not accepted, or it doesn't harm the person and he only gets rewarded for whatever the intentions was for the sake of Allah. So two opinions there. That if he keeps on going with the riya, with the show off, in that case some said that ruins his actions completely, and some said that only he loses the reward of that portion of the ibadah that he did it for other than Allah, and he gets the rewards of the ibadah that was done for the sake of Allah. So you see how the different categories here, and how that this is a serious matter, of course, when it comes to the riya. And that's why if it comes, there's no excuse to not to push it away, right? But this is different than someone being praised because of his actions, and he finds, or it feels good if someone praises him. that does not affect one's sincerity. So especially if it's after the deed is done. تلك عاجل بشرى المؤمن, as the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, he said, this is the bushra, the glad tidings for the believers is given to him in his livelihood, in his life, basically. But he should push away from his heart the ujb, that he like himself, that mashallah he says that he sees himself as someone great and so on. He should put himself down, that it's all by the help of Allah. If it's not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helped him, he would have not done such a thing. So this is what he mentioned about this first hadith. The second hadith, or actually you can call it then the first hadith afterwards, when it comes to the subject of al-tahara, and we'll take that hadith, and I don't know if we have enough time for more. He says, الحديث عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يقبل الله صلاة أحدكم إذا أحدث حتى يتوضأ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala لا يقبل, does not accept, صلاة أحدكم, the salah of one of you, إذا أحدث, if he أحدث. And we'll talk about what أحدث means. Al-hadath is action or something or event. And the language, the Arabic language has this beauty in it, in which words are chosen so that it doesn't give an embarrassing feelings, right? So it talks about breaking the wudu. We know what breaks the wudu. If a person passes window, whatever there is. And the word is إذا أحدث. If he did an event, if he did something. So al-hadath here, which has a definition in the Shara as it will be mentioned. So if someone, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept the prayer of someone, إذا أحدث, if he does what negates and breaks the wudu, حتى يتوضأ, till he makes wudu. So the salah has to be, a person has to be in state of wudu, otherwise the salah is not valid, which is very clear. Let's look at what the Shaykh rahimahullah said with regards to the benefits here. First of all, some of the meanings of the hadith. لا يقبل الله. The hadith says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept, which is in a way that is more stronger and more eloquent than the nahi itself. Why? Because it includes that it's forbidden, and it includes also that it's negating the essence of the thing. So it's not like saying no salah. It says لا يقبل الله. Different than لا صلاة لأحدكم, no salah for one of you. No, it says لا يقبل الله. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept, which means of course that this is forbidden. If it says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept your salah, does that mean a person can make salah without wudu? It's not going to be accepted, but let me do it anyway because of some other benefits? No, it's not permissible, of course. أحدث, again, أي حصل منه الحدث. الحدث, or this happened to him. What is the hadath in this context? وهو الخارج من أحد السبيلين أو غيره من نواقض الوضوء. The things that breaks the wudu, like for example what comes from the two paths. The two paths, urination, defecation, we have two ways of getting the fadalat or the toxics or whatever there is in our bodies, comes out from the front and the back. Anything that comes out, even if it's pure, even if it's a medicine that a person put it in and it came out right there. The fact that something came out, it breaks the wudu. So they take this as a qaida, as a rule. It is not necessarily with the impurities that comes out. It's not about the urine only or the feces or so. No, it's about anything that comes out. And the najasa is something else. The najasa also, of course, a person has to clean his najasa, the najasa. But what breaks the wudu, anything that comes out from the person, from sabilain, ahad sabilain, whether it's in the front or the back. So, and al-hadath is usually used, as he said, in al-idha, when something is harmful. And of course, this is something that a person hides it because it's harmful. It's not something that is pleasant. But now, al-hadath is wasfun hukmi. Al-hadath is a ruling, is something that do with the rulings, and it's not a physical thing. Why? Because now a person says he's not in state of wudu. What is the state of wudu? It's a hukm, it's a ruling. It's not something that you can touch the person and to say, or he looks, or that person looks like he has wudu, and that person doesn't look like he has wudu. No, it's a hukm, it's a ruling that is applied on the person if he would make the act of wudu after he breaks his wudu. As he says, then the general meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He commanded and guided those who want to make salah, that He doesn't just start the salah in whatever situation that he's in. He has to make the salah on the most perfect state. And that's why there's the tahara, the purification, and the wudu, and sometimes it's ghusl. It's all perfect way to make the salah and the ibadah, and this is part of ta'zeem as-salah. This is part of exalting the salah. Salah is the greatest action that a person can do in his life, is the salah. And that's why if you make the salah, then anything great has to be prepared for. You cannot just rush yourself into something important, right? All of a sudden you find yourself in it, you won't be able to do it in the right way. This is in worldly matters and of course in matters of ibadah. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He decreed this upon the believers, that they have to do things before they make the salah. And this is, as He says, لأنها الصلة الوثيقة بين الرب وعبده. This is the strong relationship between the Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and His slave. Once you say Allahu Akbar, you are in a different state completely. This is now you entered in a state that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best beyond what we see. And that's why when the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said that لو يعلم المار بين يدي المصلي لوقف أو انتظر 40. If the one that wants to cross someone's salah breaks, walks in front of a person between him and the sutra, if he knows what he's getting himself into, he would stand there for 40. And he kept it open like this. 40 days, 40 years. Why? Because we don't know the Prophet ﷺ, he said, if you know. So when a person says Allahu Akbar, this is something completely, it's the most important thing in one's life. And the more you think about it, anything that is important in one's life. If someone wants to speak to a human being or wants some help from someone, you might make sure that you want to take an appointment, and sometimes it's after a month or 2 months or whatever, something very important in your life, and the schedule is busy and all kinds of things. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the heavens and the earth, He did not just even set times only that you can make salah. You can stand up now and say Allahu Akbar, and you become in the closest position to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you're connected, because this is one of the meanings of the salah. Connection between the slave and the creator of the heavens and the earth anytime you want, except if it's makruh salah. And this is also meant for for people to observe the salah when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants them to observe it. So anytime, that's why the Prophet ﷺ كان إذا حزبه أمر فزع إلى الصلاة. Anytime something concerned him, he would rush to the salah. Who else has a better opportunity than this? You have any time you want to go and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and seek help from Allah and to be in that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are welcome to do that, and you would never be let down if you're sincere and so on, which shows again the greatness of the salah. So and that's why we are commanded to make wudu and to purify ourselves, and to show that it's going to be rejected if a person does not have wudu and things like this. 4 points or benefits to take from the hadith. First of all, أن صلاة المحدث لا تقبل. The one that is muhdith, the one that broke his wudu, his salah is not going to be accepted till he is purified from al-hadathain al-akbar wal-asghar, till he is pure from the major hadath and the minor hadath. The major one, that makes it an obligation to make ghusl, to take a shower. The minor one is that only requires the wudu. And we'll talk about the hadath al-akbar wal-asghar. The second thing, al-hadath naqid lil-wudu wa mubtil lil-salah in kana fiha. That the hadath, if it's in the salah, if a person breaks his wudu during the salah, it invalidates the salah and invalidates the wudu. So if someone breaks his wudu during the salah, then he has to leave the salah and he goes make wudu, and then he starts the salah over again. And what is meant, the third one, what is meant by adam al-qabul, what is meant by not being accepted, is adam sihhat al-salah wa adam ijza'iha. Here from the perspective of fiqh, as a ruling, if a person breaks his wudu, the salah is not valid. This is what is meant by it's not accepted. Because the hadith of an-niyat is not accepted because his intentions. Here his intention is sincerely for the sake of Allah, but he broke his wudu. So why the deed is not accepted? What is meant by not accepted, that means it's not valid salah because it has to be in wudu. Number 4, it's a clear evidence that the tahara is shart, is a condition for the salah to be accepted. It's a condition. If there's no tahara, there's no salah. This is the hadith. لا يقبل الله صلاة أحدكم إذا أحدث حتى يتوضأ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept the salah of one of you if he breaks his wudu till he makes the wudu. We'll take one more before Salatul Isha, inshallah. Before the adhan. The hadith, or the third hadith, or actually الحديث الثاني عن عبد الله بن عمرو بن العاص وأبي هريرة وعائشة رضي الله تعالى عنهم قالوا قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ويل للأعقاب من النار. The Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم said, woe to al-a'qab, the heels from the hellfire. This is the hadith. ويل للأعقاب من النار. He says al-wayl is al-adhab wal-halak, punishment and destruction. There's no fi'l, there's no verb from the word wayl. Al-wayl is masdar. Al-wayl is a pronoun that has no verb to it from the same word of it. So there's no past tense or present tense. Al-wayl, which means, as they translate it, woe, or so it refers to punishment or destruction. And this is one of the names of the valleys. One of the valleys in Jahannam is called Wayl. So al-wayl, waylun lil-a'qab, to the a'qab. Al-a'qab is the plural of aqib, and al-aqib is the back of anything. في وجعل كلمة باقية في عقبه, that he made Ibrahim alayhi salam this kalima لا إله إلا الله باقية, present في عقبه, and those who came after him. And the aqib of the person is his lineage, those who come after him. So, and you say, I did this, aqib this, that means I did this after this. So al-a'qab or al-aqib here, the back, which refers to the back of the foot, which is the heels. Not the ankles, but it's the heels, which is, you touch the ground with it, or the very back, which is part of the foot that needs to be washed. So, وَيْلٌ لِلْأَعْقَابِ مِنَ النَّارِ, which means, woe to the a'qab that from the hellfire. Is it all of the a'qab? All of the heels? Every heel will be thrown into the hellfire? No. The alif lam here, there's two types of alif lams in the Arabic language. إما أن تكون either it's للجنس أو للعهد. للجنس, that means for the kind. It's in the absolute sense. Like al-a'qab, that means all of the heels of the human beings. And that's, of course, that's not the case. Or alif lam for al-ahd, for a specific type of heels, which is the heels that is not covered with water when in wudu. So this is the meaning of the hadith. وَيْلٌ لِلْأَعْقَابِ مِنَ النَّارِ. Woe to the a'qab, to the heels on the fire, meaning the heels, not all the heels, but the heels, those who are not touched by the water. So that's how the wa'id, or the warning, becomes in place. Otherwise, it's not everyone. And that's why this is to differentiate between the alif lam for al-ahd or for al-jins. When you read the Quran, it makes sometimes people misunderstand things because of this. Is it refers to all mankind or specific individuals only? Like, for example, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's obligatory upon an-nas, upon all mankind, to make hajj. Does that mean a disbeliever, he has to go for hajj because an-nas, all mankind? Of course not. He has to be a Muslim first to make hajj. And that's why when someone, he took this ayah and he enforced his people, he was a ruler, and he said to his people, why is only for the Muslimin? The ayah says, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ. It's upon the people, for all people. So everybody, Jews and Christians, they should go, and this and that. Things like this. So it's why? Because of the ignorance. A person doesn't know the difference between what is meant by an-nas. So alif wal lam. And some people, they would bring doubt to the people in some of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ because of the lack of understanding even of the basic linguistics, and people would follow them because of the ignorance, and it's only because of this alif lam thing. أُمِرْتُ أَنْ أُقَاتِلَ النَّاسِ. I was commanded to fight the people till they say La ilaha illallah. Who are the people that is meant by this hadith? Is it the Muslimin? Of course not. Well, there are nas, there are people. So that means the hadith does not include everybody. So that means there's exception here. So the Muslimin are not what is meant by a nas here. Also, did the Prophet ﷺ fought those who had ahd and an agreement with him? Of course not. Even disbelievers. So it's not in mu'ahadeen. It's not those who have a treaty or some form of an agreement. So the only ones that are left, al-muharibin, those who are in war, in state of war with one another. This is a different situation. So it's not the entire humanity, it's those who are in war with you. So this is how what made that difference? The alif lam. So it's a serious matter, of course, with the understanding, of course, of the matter of the deen. So this is waylun lil a'qab. Al-a'qab here is specific a'qab, those who the water did not touch. And the Prophet ﷺ, as the hadith generally explains, warning from belittling or not taking care of the wudu, making the wudu without too much care. And what happens is that the person would miss parts of the wudu without having the water to run on it. Like, for example, the back of one's arm, the back of one's heel. He just doesn't care, so he washes himself quickly like this, and then his heels are still dry. So that means the wudu is not valid. That means the salah is not valid. And that's what it says, وَيْلٌ لِلْأَعْقَابِ مِنَ النَّارِ. The heels, and the Prophet ﷺ, people were making wudu, and he saw someone's back, his heel was with the sun, with the reflection of the sun. It showed that it's very dry, that it's dry compared to the rest of the foot. So the Prophet ﷺ, and this is the way also of teaching, he did not expose that person in front of everybody. He says, وَيْلٌ لِلْأَعْقَابِ مِنَ النَّارِ. He addressed everyone. Woe to the heels from the hellfire, so that they would take care of the matter. So, and also specifically the heels, because as he says, وَلَمَّا كَانَ مُؤَخِّرُ الرِّجْلِ غَالِبًا لَا يَصِلُ إِلَيْهِ مَاءُ الْوُضُوءِ. Since the heels of the foot, usually the water of wudu doesn't reach it. So that means the tahara, the salah is not going to be valid. If you leave it like this, it's not going to be washed. Your heels are not going to be washed by default. You have to do something to make sure that it's washed. So whether you put your foot on a sink or it's on the ground or whatever, you have to do something. And the first part of the foot that might be washed, at the top of it is the front part, but the heels, you have to make sure that you take care of it. And how to do that? With one's hand, and that's why the tadliq, or as it will come, to rub your hand over the organs of the wudu, even though it's sunnah, it's not a mandatory thing in the wudu, but it takes care of the rukn and the obligations in wudu. So when we say that, and this is something that we would see in fiqh, when you say this is pillar of the wudu, people sometimes they mix that with what perfection in the wudu is. So if someone puts his foot under the tap water like this and make sure that all of the foot and the heels and everything is wet and the water runs on it, this is what's valid, this is sufficient. But to perfect your wudu is that you would rub with your hands so that you make sure that with even less amount of water that the water would cover the entire foot without any extremism in the matter. So because of that, the Prophet ﷺ said this to make sure that it's taken care of. 3 benefits from the hadith, as he says. The first one is وجوب الاعتناء بأعضاء الوضوء, that it's an obligation to make the wudu, the organs of wudu, to do them good, perfectly, to take care of that, and not to miss any of this. وقد نص الحديث على القدمين. The hadith mentioned specific the 2 foot, but the rest of the organs is basically also in the same importance. But why this is only thing mentioned? If this is mentioned, that means the rest also are included, but the Prophet ﷺ only mentioned the one that usually people might miss, so he stressed this one. الوعيد الشديد المخل في وضوئه, the severe warning against those who do not do the wudu in the proper way. And the third one, أن الواجب في الرجلين الغسل في الوضوء, what is wajib, what is mandatory for washing the foot or the foot is to wash it, not to wipe over it. And that's where also the ayah in the Quran, وَامْسَحُوا بِوُجُوهِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا قُمْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق وامسحوا بوجوهكم وأرجلكم إلى الكعبين. That the ayah says when you get up for the salah, then wash your faces and your hands till the elbows and wipe your heads وامسحوا برؤوسكم, and then أرجلكم is mentioned, but أرجلكم is معطوف on the washing of the arms and the face. But since it comes after something that mentioned wiped, so a very, as he says, خلافا لشذوذ الشيعة الذين خالفوا به جماهير الأمة, different than the shudud or the what the Shia did, which is of course against all of the Ummah and against the hadith and the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the Sahaba and all of this. So they wipe over their foot. That means their salah is not valid to start with, because this is not a valid understanding of this. And that's also the importance of the Quran is explained by the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. A person might say linguistically the ayah can give that meaning, because there is a qira'ah, even there is a qira'ah, valid qira'ah, وَامْسَحُوا بِوُجُوهِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلِكُمْ with a kasrah. That means وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلِكُمْ. وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ, you wipe your heads and your foot. And but the kasr here is not even because it's ma'tuf or it comes after the head. It's because they say it is kasr bil majrur bil mujawara. It's just because it came after it, not because it has the same ruling of it. But of course the recitation that we all know, arjulakum, that means it's to be washed. But even if someone says this linguistically, who said that the Quran is to be made, the tafsir of it, only linguistically? Whoever does this, he's a deviant. And this is consensus among the Ummah, because the Quran has to be explained by the Sunnah, by the actions of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ explained the Quran with his speech and actions. So, and that shows the importance of understanding things in the proper way. Otherwise, if a person is left like that to his own desires, he can be deviated from the truth. So this is with regards to وَيْلٌ لِلْأَعْقَابِ مِنَ النَّارِ. Do we need to make adhan or continue? This is only if he doesn't wash the heels. What about the one that does not make salah to start with? That's the punishment for him. May Allah protect us.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله، أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله.
تفضل. مم. مم. And the question is, if someone started the action with riya, he started the action with showing off. It's not for the sake of Allah. And then after that, he did it for the sake of Allah. If the action started from the foundation or from the beginning of it, if it's an act of ibadah, like he says Allahu Akbar in the salah, and he is not, and that's why he says لا يكاد يصدر من مؤمن. It's, you can really think of a mu'min does this, but if it happens and he start like this, the salah is not even, is of nothing. So if he start, then oh, what am I doing? I should do it for the sake of Allah. You should start the takbir again. You should start the salah over again. No. Different than if it's if someone, for example, going to travel somewhere, and while he's traveling, he's just traveling to commit a sin. And then on the way, he changes intentions that he's going to do a good deed. So in that case, he doesn't have to go back and start the traveling again. Then he just continue with the good intentions. But the ibadah, if it starts like this, it's not valid. No. Now, the ruling of washing the foot and not wipe it, is it with the ruling of socks? No, this is, if there's socks, then you can wipe over the socks with the conditions that will be mentioned, inshallah. But this is with regards when there's no socks on the foot, then a person has to wash his foot and not to wipe the foot. Wiping over the socks or the leather socks, this is valid with specific conditions, but without the socks, then it's mandatory to wash. Now, Ahsan, when it comes to what constitutes al-ghusl, or washing an organ, like for example the foot or the arm, you don't have to make the water run on the entire organ. It is sufficient to put some water in your hands. It doesn't have even to have both hands. One hand, and if you pour it on the organ, that means the water is running. It doesn't have to run on every single part of it. If it's the water is running, and then with your hand you wipe, this is sufficient. So what makes it ghusl is that the water was running on a part of the organ, and then with your hand, with your rubbing your hand, it covers the entire organ. So the same thing for the foot. You pour some water, and then with your hand you wipe the heels and everything and the ankle, then this is washing. No. If someone is traveling and he entered the masjid with the intention of praying Isha 2 rak'ah, and he saw a jama'ah, so he prayed behind them, and they were praying Maghrib instead. So should a person make salam after the 2 rak'ah because he's supposed to pray only 2, or what do you do in this case? First, going back for a second here, if you enter the masjid and the people are praying Isha 4 rak'ah, and you're supposed to pray 2 rak'ah only because you're musafir, you're a traveler, and if you join that jama'ah, you pray with them 4 rak'ah. And no differences of opinions of this. You don't make salam after 2 rak'ah, you follow the imam. So if someone walks in now, for example, in Salatul Isha, and we pray in Isha 4 rak'ah, and he's a traveler, so he prays 2 rak'ah only, no. If he leads the salah, he can pray 2 rak'ah. But if he's a follower behind the imam, he has to follow the imam in the number of rak'at that he does or more. So in that case, you entered the salah and you did know that they were praying Maghrib, or if you knew that they were praying Maghrib, no problem. you can join them in the salah, and then when the imam makes salam, you get up to make a fourth rak'ah, and your intention is Salatul Isha, and you prayed 4 rak'ah, and that's valid. Right. Right. 4, because there's no Isha 3, so you have to make it 4, so you get up for a fourth rak'ah now. Which is actually, if he says, what if you join after 1 rak'ah? So you pray with the imam 2 rak'ah. Can you make salam? No. إنما جعل الإمام ليؤتم به. If the imam, like the example, if someone comes in the 3rd rak'ah of Salatul Isha and he's a traveler, so can he just pray the 3rd rak'ah and the 4th rak'ah for himself? This is the 1st and 2nd and make salam? No. He has to get up and pray 2 rak'ah to make it 4, because the imam is praying 4. Yes, whatever rak'at the imam is doing, you do the same way, unless he's doing less than what you're supposed to do, then you have to do more.
So if the traveler is leaving in phase 2 and I'm not traveling actively with him, then I pay 2?
Now, if the traveler is leading the salah, and it's, for example, Salatul Isha, he prays 2, and those who are behind him, they complete and they make it 4. They don't make salam and they complete. Can the ma'moom, in this case a traveler, make Salatul Isha, for example, 4 rak'ah? Al-Qasr is sunnah, and it's a very stressed sunnah, but it's not a must, it's not a mandatory thing, different than Imam Hanifa, for example. But in some situations, you might, if a person is forced to lead the people in the salah, and the people behind him, they have no idea about these rulings, and it's in situations where people might be confused and things like this, then in that case, he might pray 4 rak'ah, so that he does not confuse the people, or if it's a good opportunity to teach the people, then he can teach them, things like this. And who has the more rights to lead the salah? Of course, those who are resident, but sometimes in certain occasions they might want someone to lead them in the salah, then that's fine. No, should he was, okay, he was, go ahead. No.
Is this, do we have to make wudu, like, to have an not is this like the sunnah, or do you have to do an action like wudu in order to pray 2 rak'ahs?
You have to make wudu to make 2 rak'ah. The hadith. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, كان إذا حزب أمر فزع إلى الصلاة. Whatever a matter concerns him, ﷺ, he would rush to the salah. So of course, you have to have wudu. And you don't have to renew your wudu if you already have wudu, but that means he would immediately go for the salah because of that matter that happened. Is that clear?
It's clear, because I was thinking first before you explained it. So this is like a sunnah that you can practice whenever something concerns you.
Right.
You just go and pray 2 rak'ahs.
Ahsant. Now, this is a sunnah to be practiced. And that's also it's a very, very important and a good sunnah to practice, and it has an effect on one's heart, because if you're concerned about something, what happens? You start thinking about it. All right? But if you leave it to Allah and you rush to the salah, it has a great effect on one's iman. Now, you had a question? Is it allowed to stretch your feet against the Qibla? As far as everything has a context to it, right? So if someone is stretching his foot against the Qibla to belittle the Qibla, or making mockery, if he thinks that he's making mockery of the deen, mockery of the Qibla, this is such an evil thing. But if he's just extending his foot against the Qibla, there's nothing wrong with that. And it's not actually making mockery of the Qibla, is not belittling, is not disrespect of the Qibla. Because actually one of the ways to pray when a person is laying down, if a person is not able to stand or sit in the salah, one of the forms of making salah, if a person is extremely sick and he's in bed, he cannot even sit, is to lay on your back, and if a person prop his head up a little bit like this, he's laying back, but his head is up so that it's facing the Qibla, and his foot faces the Qibla. So this is one of the ways to make salah. So that's why it's nothing wrong with that. But if a person is sitting in a gathering of ilm, for example, and he stretches his foot like that or sits in a funny way, this is, of course, manners to be observed. And also to observe this in some localities, in some places, the urf, the norm of the people, if they consider something to be bad manners, maybe it can be observed, but not to make it part of the deen. You see what I'm saying? Like if the urf of people, for example, that if I have to go in with a gift, for example, then I should try and make sure that I go in with a gift, otherwise they might misunderstand me. But it's not a religious duty or something like this. No. Allah barik feek.
How about if someone is not sure if they can do or not, before and after Salah, after Salah already,
No. The subject of having doubt whether a person have wudu or not. If a person is in doubt whether he made wudu or not, then the original ruling, always when it comes to a shak or the doubt, you go back to the what is you're certain about. You're certain that you don't have wudu, but then you're in doubt whether you made wudu or not. So that means you don't have wudu. Then you have to go make wudu. Which is different than if you're in doubt whether you broke your wudu or not. So what is certain? That you have wudu. You remember very well you made wudu. But you're in doubt whether you broke your wudu or not. So this, it is not permissible if you are in the salah to leave the salah. Because you are in wudu. And the Prophet ﷺ forbade that. Because the certainty is that you made wudu, but you're in doubt. Unless unless he becomes certain. If he's either by hearing a sound of passing gas, for example, or if he smells something. Or he would say that the level of certainty, as Abdullah ibn Mubarak rahimahullah, he said that he swears by Allah, I broke my wudu. If he's in that level of certainty, then he has to leave the salah. But if it's doubt, it's not permissible and the salah is valid. And the shak, the doubt that comes after the salah, is not to be looked even to whatsoever. That's the difference between the shak, between the wudu or breaking the wudu. طيب, we'll stop here inshallah. We'll continue after Salatul Isha. وصلنا وسلم بارك محمد وصحبه وسلم.